Welcome to Front Office Pros. With one game left to go, Joe, we're practically at that point where the 2024 season is coming to a close, and you might be out there saying, what did I do with those rookie draft picks that you made last season? Because they could have been your biggest dynasty mistakes.
Hike!
When it comes to a dynasty team's success, we can't emphasize enough how much you have to avoid making mistakes in your rookie drafts. The rookie draft is the pinnacle of how well you do as a team. You got to draft well. While looking over this in this past year, we had some prospects that people were really excited for, and boy, did they disappoint. And so we're going to talk about how they were the biggest dynasty mistakes and what do you do about them going forward. So let's talk about the first guy who, Joe, probably was the 101 for most dynasty drafts last year, which is wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. Just a couple key stats here to throw out here. He was wide receiver 29 on the year. He had 110 targets, 57 catches, 822 yards, and 7 touchdowns in 16 games. In that stretch, there were only 5 games of those 16 games that he went over 60 yards, which I would say is somewhat concerning. When you look at his catch rate on contested targets, something that he was very well known for, he was considered a generational prospect, obviously the son of Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison. Only had a 33% success rate in his rookie year, had a 51.82% catch rate, with, if you look at it, a significant portion of his targets, 80% throwing on the outside of the numbers, which made it quite difficult for him, but that's not very good. We knew that his yards after the catch was a weakness for him. And lastly, I think the most troubling, Joe, is his average separation, which we look at, if you look at next-gen stats, that's the distance in yards measured between a wide receiver and the nearest defender at the time of a catch or incompletion. He was the worst amongst all receivers with 2 yards. So, Joe, I think looking over Marvin Harrison Jr., there was so much excitement built up for this guy. And we, and some may be feeling that, man, this was a huge mistake. So thinking about it, is it important for someone out there to be patient with Marvin Harrison Jr., or do they try to capitalize as much as they can on his name value and be able to get as much as you can for him, kind of get off this sinking ship?
Yeah, I think, it's important. Some dynasty assets are different than others, but I think in the case of Marvin Harrison Jr., I think patience is probably the way to go. I think the hype just got to this guy. I know you and I were both very excited about him. I think we were excited with even the landing spot of the Arizona Cardinals because everyone just kind of assumed, us included, DeAndre Hopkins got supported by Kyler Murray. Thought, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the same kind of body type of DeAndre Hopkins. Thought he could be a similar type of player, and that Kyler Murray would just pepper him with targets, and he'd, be very productive. And it just, hasn't turned out to be the case. And one thing I thought was interesting, especially like the separation yards, is like AJ Brown is only at 2.1. He's second worst to, Marvin Harrison Jr. And yet he's got over 1,000 yards and been a very productive fantasy player. So I'm not sure. I'm sure that the quarterback has a lot to do with that. And obviously, like, his catch rate has been a lot better, which I think he's getting more catchable passes from Jalen Hurts. But, catch rate for AJ Brown is 69 and versus, just under 52% for Marvin Harrison Jr. So obviously that has a lot to do with it. But I think, one encouraging thing was this past game against the Rams. Marvin Harrison, he had 10 targets, 96 yards, didn't end up getting a touchdown. But I think that's more so what we thought we'd get out of him. 10 targets, but 6 catches for 96 yards, averaging 16 yards per catch. That's the type of game we thought we were going to get from him. And hopefully that glimpse that we saw with the Rams is what we kind of can get in the future here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at DeAndre Hopkins at his peak with the Cardinals, the best he did was 8 touchdowns. So, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 7. So it's not all that much different. Right. It's just that he had, at his peak, 160 targets, 115 catches for 1,407 yards, compared to Marvin Harrison with 110 targets, so 50 targets less, 57 catches, almost that's like 60 or almost 60-ish catches, and then 822 yards compared to 1,407. So that's another 600 yards. So a pretty big gap as far as those numbers were concerned. I think the biggest question that you may have was surrounding Kyler Murray. I think we were so excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. being partnered with him, like we talked about, with that connection that he had with DeAndre Hopkins. Could we see a similar role being played? But, is Kyler's not, I don't think, going anywhere anytime soon from a contract standpoint. He's kind of stuck there for at least another year or two. I want to say at least 2 years. Do you think they'll just get back? They'll be kind of more on the same page next year? Is that the hope? I mean, I'm with you. I think you got to be patient with him. I think it's too early to decide to try to trade him away. I'd be curious what you could get for him if you did try to trade him away, because somebody out there, because of if they missed out on their drafts, this is your opportunity to go buy him, because I don't know if you'll get another chance.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to buy him, I mean, now's your chance in terms of price, just because I think we just had these skyrocket expectations for this, Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously son of a Hall of Famer, and, Marvin Harrison himself, just thinking he's going to fall in line with his dad and follow in those footsteps and be this elite receiver, which he could very well still turn into. We just thought it was going to come faster right out of the gate. But I do wonder if having more of a full off season with Kyler, that they do get more on the same page. You got to remember, Marvin Harrison Jr. had all these distractions with, the Fanatics deal and several other things, and things that he wasn't going to sign, and just kind of prolonged his offseason. And I think it distracted him ultimately from really being able to get the work in training camp and being with Kyler Murray and getting those things down. So I do think another training camp and, just another year and another offseason in the NFL, I think he does have the opportunity for that connection to get better.
Well, I was thinking that Marvin Harrison, by him being there, Trey McBride would take a step back. That didn't happen. Trey McBride was, like you anticipated, was going to continue to be very good. So that'll be interesting to see how that possibly affects Marvin Harrison Jr.'s value there. Is he the number one target there, or is he the number two to Trey McBride? That's an interesting, DeAndre Hopkins didn't have to contend with that back in the day. I mean, there was AJ Green there, but AJ Green at that time was kind of, over the hill.
Not the AJ Green that we were used to, from elite fantasy production standpoint. But I think there's still room for both of these guys to grow, because I think ultimately, I think Marvin Harrison, like we've seen, is that deep target guy, deep down the field guy, the outside throws, and Trey McBride's more so ultimately Kyler's safety blanket. A lot of the, Kyler gets in trouble, he's throwing it to Trey McBride underneath, and Trey McBride's getting the yak. And seeing how we know that's not the yards after catch is also not a strength of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's why he's more of that deep target guy, and hopefully he improves that contested catch rate.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So the next player we're going to be talking about here was another guy who was deemed a generational prospect, who you may be feeling was a mistake, and that's quarterback Caleb Williams, a guy who was hyped as the next Patrick Mahomes type of prospect based on his off-platform throws. But when you look at his season overall, Joe, there's some troubling numbers here. He led the league in quarterback sacks with 67 sacks, 15 more than Stroud. His average time to throw was 2.91 seconds, which was very average. So a lot of people are going to contribute that to the Chicago Bears offensive line. I'm not so sure that's the case. And I know you, based on your your nod there, you agree with me that that's not the case, because the thing is, he just held the ball too long because he was trying to make plays. And I think I give you a lot of credit, Joe, because you were on this from the beginning. You were very much a proponent for Jaden Daniels. You zagged another zig because, Caleb Williams, and I got caught up into it as well. But he's got to get over this holding on the ball and trying to play hero ball and make these magical throws, because otherwise I don't know if he could be successful. I don't think, Thomas Brown, as the interim head coach now, or his former offensive coordinator Shane Waldron didn't any help. but the next coaching staff could really loom large for him.
Yeah, it definitely does. And honestly, the next coaching staff really looms large if you ended up drafting Caleb in your dynasty league too, because like you said, this was exactly what I was worried about. Just him holding onto the ball and just making those magical plays where he just scrambles around in college and those deep passes. Was like, I was concerned about him being able to do that in the NFL. These guys are bigger, stronger, faster, and you just can't do that. And you got to stay, on time in your offense. You don't have time to hold it for over 4 seconds, which he's been doing. And you mentioned the offensive line's been giving him almost 3 seconds. Like, at some point, he needs somebody to coach this out of him and just trust like the flow of the offense and give him an easy read. And he needs to just be on time and hit it. And, too much of this ad lib stuff has gotten him in trouble, which was my concern. But I do think, I think it can be coached out. Like we've seen, what a Joe Brady has done for even Josh Allen. They run the ball more, take less off of Josh Allen's plate. He passes less, and ultimately he's a more efficient player. He's not playing hero ball. He's not throwing all those interceptions that he used to. In fact, the Bills have the best turnover rate right now in the NFL, and it's largely because, they have a lot of guys for Josh Allen to throw the ball to. There's not that alpha receiver anymore. They spread the ball around, trust the run game, and I feel like Caleb Williams needs something similar to that, more structure and just easier reads for him to spread the ball around.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the numbers as far as the stats go, it's not. I mean, people would look at it and be like, "Well, what's the big deal?" Right? He threw,
Right.
he had 533 attempts, 303 completions, which was around 61.9% completion percentage, 3,393 yards, 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That ranks 17th as far as passing yards, so right in the middle. 78 carries for 479 yards. I think the concerning thing, though, from a fantasy perspective, is 5 out of 17 games he was a QB1. So more often than not, he was not or I guess 5 out of the 16, you're not counting the bye. But he was not a QB. He was only a QB1 for 5 games, and he ranked as the QB 14. And if you look at his on-target percentage for throws was in the bottom 5. So there was a lot of plays that the passes were inaccurate. So I guess in your opinion, Joe, based on the body of work from what we've seen with Caleb Williams and kind of this whole thought behind this episode, are we overreacting based on this early season performance? The hesitancy would be, are people going to say, hey, I'm going to trade this guy quickly to try to get the value? Or is he an underperformer who will turn it around? What are your thoughts here on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I think he's an underperformer that has the ability to turn things around, but it's gonna depend on the next coaching staff and this next hire. If it's somebody like maybe a Ben Johnson that can turn this thing around, or even see like Bryce Young, right? He's got Canales, and at first it didn't really go well, but then he got benched and he got to see kind of Dalton operate things, and then ever since he gotten back, he's been much better. But we kind of see that with an offensive mind. Caleb needs something like that and to help him along. And I think as long as something like that happens, he's got a chance to be, even though he's been disappointing to this point, he's got a chance to be an overachiever. And everyone was just so high on Caleb, and especially they were so excited with the landing spot of Chicago because they went out and got Keelan Allen, had DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet, but they're not even using all these weapons either at the same time. Like Keenan Allen's come on along with great, but like DJ Moore is even taking a step back from fantasy relevance than what he had with Justin Fields, and people were not liking Justin Fields. So I do think, even though he's at a disappointing rookie year, I think with the right coaching, as long as he gets that, he can have a more potential, in future years.
I mean, at the end of the day, in Superflex leagues, Caleb Williams probably went in the 102 area. In your dynasty leagues, if not in a traditional quarterback, he still probably was a late to middle first rounder, depending on based on the hype, because there was so much hype around this guy.
Yeah.
If it was me and I owned him, I don't. I thought it could be good, but I kind of got nervous towards the end, and I kind of got a little shy. So I said, I'm backing off on this train. I would hold off until we know what the coaching staff is. I think depending on the coaching hire, no offense, but if Mike Vrabel is the head coach, I'm hitting the panic button. If from a fantasy perspective. He could be good
How about
as a
Pete
player.
Carroll?
That one also
That's
could be
kind
concerning.
of in the realm.
Yeah, that would also be concerning to me, I think, as well. But if it's a Ben Johnson, okay, I'm gonna hold off.
Right.
I think there could be that. If it's a Cliff Kingsbury, that
Mm.
one's in the middle for me, but maybe. So I think that depending on who the coaching staff is, I think could have a huge bearing. You got to remember, Keenan Allen probably gone. Roma Dunze is going into year 2. You got DJ Moore, so there's still enough weapons there. But I mean, I'm even hearing Mike Lombardi, and it was saying like, what is going on with this team? It's like they're playing Madden. Like it's like they, they're in their mind, like he's like how they built this team. Like they found like, oh, we're just gonna throw the ball a ton. We have all these receivers, like
Yeah.
not so fast. So it's like at the end of the day, I would hold based on the coaching decision. I could decide to say, you know what, I'm gonna trade this guy.
Yeah. I think tough part is like depending on who goes there too, though, also increases that trade value. Like if Ben Johnson does go there, like that also increases the intrigue for the trade value. So it'd be interesting. I do think they're probably yet to see the best. We're definitely yet to see the best out of Caleb Williams. I don't think he's gonna be a bust in the traditional terms like we've seen other quarterbacks be. But part of the other reason why I like Jaden Daniels more was just strictly from the running ability. Like Jaden Daniels has a chance to possibly rush for 1,000 yards in his rookie season, where Caleb Williams is only, he's just under 500 yards. So that difference alone also just, Daniel's playing more college ball, more ready, which is why I like the more, plus that rushing upside. That's why I was telling people he was my number one guy.
So last player we're going to be talking about here as far as the biggest dynasty mistakes, and this one honestly might be the biggest with the possible bust potential. Yeah. That's going to be running back Jonathon Brooks. When you look at consensus dynasty rookie pick rankings here for ADP, you're looking at him going around the 107. And, he was a guy that had a lot of hype based, and rightfully so, right? I mean, heading into the 2024 NFL draft, he had an impressive year in Texas. He showed a lot of burst vision, had that 3-down potential. He was able to run and receive, and really the low mileage. He only had 1 year where he played in Texas because he sat behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. So there's a lot of excitement around Jonathon Brooks, but ultimately he was, rehabbing from an ACL. Ended up being the running back 103 on the season, 9 carries for 22 yards, 3 catches for 23 yards. He ended up tearing his ACL, and that's now 2 ACL tears in less than 13 months. So they're talking about his 2025 season being in jeopardy. We saw Chuba Hubbard get an contract extension for the Panthers, had a really great year. And this is an underlying story that I think is helpful to kind of talk about maybe some wouldn't think it, but I do. Jonathon Brooks was picked number 46 in the NFL draft. That was the latest first running back selected since Bishop Sankey back in 2014. He was taken number 54, and that made Brooks the second latest first running back off the board since the AFL-NFL merger back in 1970. So these NFL teams, they're evaluating these talents. They're going to say, hey, what do we think about these position groups? That alone told you the position group for running backs in their mind wasn't very good. And if you looked across the board, they all underperformed other than Bucky Irving. You had Blake Corum never saw the field. You had Trey Benson never really saw the field. You had Jonathon Brooks coming back from the injury. He obviously, we're talking about him, he didn't do that well. There was some buzz about Marshawn Lloyd. Went on IR, wasn't able to stay healthy, never saw the field. Jalen Wright, a guy we thought could maybe get in the mix for Miami. It was Devin Achane the whole time. And then you had Audric Estime. Some people were kind of excited about him. He didn't really have as many opportunities as we thought he could have. I think you got Braylon Allen and Ray Davis, guys who people weren't expecting, but they showed some flashes. So Bucky Irving was really the one shining star in that group. But What do you do about Jonathon Brooks now? A guy who now is going to be rehabbing. You're now talking about more than likely, even if he is going to be productive in the NFL, he's entering into year 3 of his rookie contract with 2 years remaining. So what are your thoughts on? I mean, honestly, I think you have to hold him, right? I mean, like if you even tried to trade for this guy, what do you even get? I mean, are you just cutting your losses at this point if you were to trade him?
Yeah, I mean, I would personally try to sell him.
You would cut your losses and just say, you know
I
what?
would, because this upcoming draft class is looking better for running backs, and like you said, it was a disappointing running back class this past year. But I also wouldn't. I'm not looking to just give them away, but I think if you give them get a decent enough offer, and maybe there's still that intrigue because there, like you said, there was a lot of hype around Jonathon Brooks being the number one running back out of this rookie class, and he was productive, looked good in college too, as well. And like you said, he didn't have the mileage and the workload that other guys did either. But the injury concerns obviously are a concern, which also doesn't help in your trade value. But like I said, as long as it's not a low ball offer, I would just kind of probably sell him and cut my losses, because I'm not sure how long you're going to have to wait for him to be a good, relevant fantasy player like you were expecting him to be when you drafted him. 1 year in the NFL has already got another ACL injury. You mentioned the Chuba Hubbard thing, getting in the extension. That's a potential block for him. I know there's, looking on Spotrac here, it shows they got a potential out in 2026. So maybe it is only one season, but for a running back position that's kind of scarce, there could be interested in a player trading, and that's just another year that you kind of have to wait for Jonathon Brooks to ascend. And the Panthers also aren't a patient organization. That's not to say that they bring in another running back into the fold if it's not Chuba Hubbard. So I think just the injuries and the go ahead.
Or another coach. I was going to say,
Right, yeah,
I mean, Dave Canales, right? I mean, I think he saved his job, but he could very well, him and the general manager, they could, who knows, Tepper could clean house, and now you're talking about a complete new regime, and they don't have any ties back to Jonathon Brooks.
right, yeah. No, they don't. I mean, that's always a concern as well. But yeah, I mean, I could see you being patient, but me personally, I think I would just kind of just see what the value I was there, and if everyone's just lowballing you, keep them. But if you get a halfway decent offer, I'd take it.
Honestly, I'm actually going to agree with you on this. At first I was going to say no, like don't do it, don't trade him away, because you're going to get like pennies on a dollar for him. But if you look at even last year, though, I know this sounds crazy, and I'd be curious. I could look at this up right now, but even I mentioned trade keep trade cut isn't the best source, but it's a source, right?
Right.
But Bucky Irving, you look at him, he was a consensus 308 in the third round. If someone asked you today, I'll give you Bucky Irving for Jonathon Brooks, they would take it in a heartbeat. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
100%.
So to me, if you get a third round pick for Jonathon Brooks, especially with this running back class coming up, which is a really good running back class, it might be worth it, honestly. I mean, I understand you drafted Jonathon Brooks in the first round. It's going to be painful. You may be able to get a second. Who knows? I don't think so. But, I mean, would you rather? I mean, I know it's crazy. Would you rather have Braylon Allen and Ray Davis or Roderick Estime instead of Jonathon Brooks? I don't know. It's tough, right? I mean, I'm not as excited about any of those guys. Those guys were all behind starters other than Estime. But he's not a, 3-down back. He's not really there for the receiving role.
There's no Bronco running back as a 3-down back with Sean Payton. Hit one carry and you get off the field for another running back. It's crazy.
So I mean, I don't think it's tough. I mean, you look at the contract. You are right. They could definitely get out of the Chuba Hubbard contract. In 2026, that's when Jonathon Brooks would be, I think, healthy and possibly ready to go to play. But I don't know. It's a very interesting situation.
Yeah, and it just concerns me with you see these guys with these repetitive injuries. I guess you saw like J.K. Dobbins, finally coming back and having a good year with the Chargers. He still, was on the IR for a little bit this year, but he's back to fantasy relevance. But it took a while, right, for J.K. Dobbins to not be injured and get to this point to kind of be a productive fantasy player for you. And in Dynasty, sometimes, like if you want to continue to be competitive, you don't always have the time to wait for these guys to get to that fantasy relevance. So it might just be better to take that third round pick and turn it into a player that could help you compete now versus having to wait for Brooks. And who knows, these ACLs are also tough injuries to come back from, and we see running backs not be the same after. So who knows what version of Jonathon Brooks we're getting after 2 ACL surgeries now.
Yeah, right. Which is his whole thing was his explosiveness and his agility, and so there's a lot up in the air. And I think that really kind of, I think, is a great way to kind of conclude what we're talking about here. I think it's important when you think about from your dynasty rosters, you want to avoid some common mistakes, and it's hard, right? It's hard to turn over your roster. Do you turn over a guy like Jonathon Brooks and get that 3rd round pick? You could very well depend on where you're at. Are you a year away from competing? Are you at the point of competing? So that tension to manage between having patience as well as saying, hey, I'm going to make this calculated trade because I think I'm going to make that next step up. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So as you are going out throughout this offseason, these are going to be I will guarantee you are going to get offers. If you have these 3 players, you're more than likely probably going to hear some chatter from your league mates ask you, hey, are you interested in trading this guy? Because these were all the biggest dynasty mistakes of this season. And if people like them during the draft process, they're going to reach out and they're going to want them.
Yeah, 100%. And just looking at it from the wide receiver, man, like I know we were debating like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Liked Marvin Harrison Jr. with the situation, but like Neighbors has had a nice season with random quarterbacks. Even Brian Thomas Jr. with the Jaguars, he's got Mac Jones throwing him the ball, and he's a productive fantasy receiver. So that is just another thing to kind of think about with Marvin Harrison Jr., especially with the lack of separation and things. It's just like he was in a good situation, thought Kyler was going to be a better quarterback for him, but these other rookie receivers are performing with a lot lesser talent at the quarterback position.
Oh, absolutely. And feel free to put your comments below, kind of share your experience of the players that you draft, or maybe we didn't talk about, a player that you think might have been one of the biggest dynasty mistakes you made in drafting. Go ahead and put it down below. Happy to be able to share our thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.